Hey folks, Andy here, thanks for joining me. Right, time to take a look at adjusting neck relief. Now, neck relief is a measure of the amount of bend that a guitar neck has in it. If you imagine you start off with a neck which is pretty much flat, then you put a set of strings on the top of it and you tighten them up, and they're going to try to bend the neck so that the headstock raises relative to where the body of the guitar is. So a neck can do, well, it can do a lot of things, but three basic things we're going to think about here. One is it can have a backward bend, so that the strings are going to be rubbing in the middle of the neck, or they're going to be closer to the neck in the middle. That's pretty much disastrous, whichever way you look at it. It could be absolutely dead straight, which is what some people, especially sort of real shreddy players, tend to feel is the absolute gold standard for what a neck should be. And it can curve upwards. If you think about what a neck that curves upwards does, is it puts more space between the string and the frets round about the middle of the neck. So on a dead straight neck, the nut sets the action on the lowest frets. You then have bridge height, which lifts the strings at an angle. So you get a neck running like that and a set of strings running like that. You can see on the diagram here. And basically the action gets higher as you go up the neck. If you are the sort of player who likes to play with the strings kind of painted onto the fingerboard, you know, that ultra low action, and you don't mind a bit of buzzing, play with a light touch, this is the way to get the lowest possible action on as much of the neck as you can do. If, on the other hand, you like to hit the strings a little bit harder, maybe you play more at the bottom end of the neck, you don't like fret buzz, which is where I come from. I absolutely hate and loathe fret buzz, which is why I tend to play heavier strings, higher action, and a bit more neck relief. A little bit more bow in the neck, as you can see in the diagram here, gives you more space under the string on most of the frets. Makes it a little bit harder to play in the middle of the neck, but you're going to get a cleaner sound from it. The trouble with all of this is it sounds very well and good, but if you don't know how you prefer it, how do you know how you prefer it? So where do you start when it comes to adjusting it? And I think the best answer to this is go to the manufacturer's website and get a set of standard figures for whatever guitar you have, and then adjust to that and see how you get on with it. If you adjust your guitar to what the website says, and then you play it and it's got a decent action at the 12th or 15th fret, wherever you're supposed to be measuring your action, but it's still buzzing and rattling and you don't like it, then release the tension in the truss rod a little bit, get a little bit more bend. If you're playing and you're struggling a bit with action in the middle of the neck, maybe you need to tighten it up just a little bit and see how it works for you. So let's have a little look at what we do to actually adjust this. So we're going to have a look and see what the neck relief is looking like. You need to be doing this or trying to do this with the guitar in the playing orientation, but it's kind of difficult to do it and demonstrate at the same time. So I'm going to do it lying down, and then we'll sort of flip it over and have a quick look at it there. So what we need to do first off is take the height of the nut and the height of the bridge out of the equation. So to remove the height of the nut issue, I'm just going to stick a capo down there on the first fret, and then come up to the point where the neck joins the body. I think Gibson recommends fretting at the 15th and measuring at round about the 8th. And if you can see, but as I'm moving that, there is just a little tiny bit of movement. Now, we've got some recommendations from the Gibson website, and a Les Paul ships with a set of 9 to 42 gauge strings on it, and the Gibson starting point recommendation is between 10 and 12 thousandth of an inch. So that's between a quarter and basically a bit less than a third of a millimeter. You can measure it with a set of feeler gauges. However, the numbers are great as a starting point, as a guideline, but they're really not that crucial. This is one of those things where, as long as it's about right, you really need to adjust it after you've played it for a while, just to sort of see where you're going. So if you have a business card, a business card is typically round about 13 thou. Now, there's a whole range of adjustments that sort of work for these. So if I fret here and then just come down to that 8th fret and slide my card under, that is just moving. That neck relief is probably really not too bad, but what I will say is this is Sam's guitar, and Sam is primarily a singer who is going to be playing some guitar, which means that he's going to be playing rhythm guitar parts. And this is a short scale guitar, and he's got a set of 9 through 42s on here, which are slightly light strings. he is probably going to be whacking the strings a bit as he's singing. So what I think I'm going to do is just give him a tiny, tiny fraction more neck relief, just to give those strings a little bit more space to sort of shake about. He's unlikely to be ripping lead parts up and down the neck on this thing when he's on stage. So I think that's probably a reasonable sort of choice to make. So what we need to do is have a look on the Les Paul. We've got this truss rod cover down at this end, and all we need to do is find the appropriate screwdriver bit, put it in and just try it. That will do us. Okay, if we take a look in there, you can see the recess, and because this is a Gibson, it's horribly sloppy and unfinished, because let's face it, only a Gibson is good enough. And there is the nut at the end of the truss rod. So if we tighten that, then we're going to straighten the neck, and if we slacken it, we're going to allow the strings to pull the neck up a little bit. And because I said that I wanted to give this a little bit more space, I'm going to take a socket, get it on there. Now, because of the way these fit, you tend to need a thin-walled socket. Make sure you've got the right size. It will vary depending on what sort of guitar you've got, where it was made. I'm going to put my bar on there. You see, I've got I'm not going to use much leverage on this. Now, I will say is I want to slacken this off, and I would always say make your movements go between, let's figure, a quarter turn and an eighth of a turn at a time, and then retune and check it. Because this is very close to where it needs to be, there's actually nothing wrong with the guitar as it is. I'm just going to give it a tiny little turn, and that's nice and easily and freely moving. So I've just slackened that off. I need to get the guitar into the right position, tune it up, check that gap, and see what it all looks like. So bear with me. Capo back on, fretted up at the body, and in that middle of the neck, we've got just that little tiny bit of movement, and I'm going to take my card. See what we're doing there. So this is an 11th thou. That's quite a nice easy fit. So let's go up, and there's a 15. Okay, I'm going to say that's about good. You've got to be careful when you're putting your feeler gauge in. If you push it in too far, the curve of the fret is going to make it move the string. But okay, if sounds a really heavy hitter, we'll maybe have to pop that up just a little bit. But I think for most things you're going to want to do, that will be round about in the ballpark. Okay. Right, so I am not going to take this apart just to do the exercise, but on this guitar, if you look down at the headstock end, there is no way to get into where the truss rod fits. You have to do it via this end, and the truss rod adjustment, you might just be able to see, you can just see the top of the screw sticking up there a little bit where you can't get to it. So you will see on some vintage Strats, something I can play here has kind of got a gouge machined into it that enables you to get a screwdriver in to adjust that. What you would have to do on this guitar to reach it is slacken off these. Now, we call them bolt-on necks, they're not, they're screw-on necks, so these are just wood screws. And what you need to do is you might want to slacken the strings a little bit, and then take these two screws out a couple of turns, and then take these out 4 or 5 turns, so that you've got the ability to move the neck so that this bit pops up. So you're going to move the neck backwards like that. And in doing so, you get access to the screw that's down here, get a screwdriver in. And the same thing goes, turn it to the right, tighten it to straighten the neck, to the left to slacken the neck, and then put it back in place. And you have to nip everything up, tune it up. It's a double whammy of pain on a Strat, because when you've got a floating trem system, that's going to play havoc with you as well. What you will also need to check is that when you fasten the neck back in, even on a really well fitted neck pocket, there's still a bit of movement that way and that way. So use your outer strings and make sure that they look right along the length of the neck as you line them up. So that's traditional old Strats and Tellys. Some of the Fenders, like some of that have the bullet truss rod adjustment up here, which makes life as easy as on the Les Paul, or even easier. They tend to take a hex key inside them rather than a nut on the outside. And the other system, which I'll just show you, is this. So Music Man, Floyd Rose on it, no access to the truss rod at the headstock end again. But what we have here is this little beast that you can see which is a disc with holes in it. And what you can do is you can put the end of something like a hex key in there, and you can wind it clockwise or anti-clockwise to make the adjustment, and you can do that kind of on the fly. Right, there you go. It's really not that complicated. Truss rod adjustment is probably the thing that is the starting point for fear with a lot of people doing their first round of guitar setup stuff, because it feels like it's something that you can do damage with, and you can if you go mad with it. So the real secret, I think, with neck relief is get it into the ballpark, try it. If you don't like it, make tiny small adjustments on it, and then really don't worry about it. The time when it's going to start becoming an issue where it might change is if you're in a part of the world where you get massive swings in temperature and humidity, where your neck can be straightening and curving depending on the season. If you live somewhere like that, then you're probably going to get pretty good at doing this pretty quickly. If you live somewhere like I do in the south of England, you'd set them and forget them most of the time. Okay, take care. If this is useful, please hit the thumbs up, hit the bell for notifications, hit the subscribe button. Look after yourselves and see you next time out. Bye now.